May will be joining us later. But in the meantime, I just want to say very much hello and thank you so much for joining us for the BYP Network Conference. So I'm super excited for this session, and I hope everyone on the call is as well. So thank you so much for putting all of your sort of like where you've like logged in from in the chat. So can see see lots and lots of London. I've seen Northampton, all sorts, Portsmouth, and like I said, if you've got any questions at all, like please put them in the chat and we'll definitely come back to them. And it would be lovely to see everyone's faces, but I totally understand it's 5:30 on a Thursday evening. No problem if you want to keep those off. So today you're going to be hearing from different Salesforce leaders who are based over here in the UK and Ireland, who will share their career journeys with you and offer advice on how to like break into the tech industry and also share their successes. We want to make sure that the next 45 minutes is as engaging, interactive and fun as possible. So ask those questions, we'll definitely come back to them, but there'll be 25 minutes or so where the leaders that you see when we meet the panel in a moment will introduce themselves and we'll go through a bit of a panel session. So before we meet today's panel, I just want to give a sort of like learn about you and also learn about Salesforce. So Salesforce is like at its core, I would say, a company of innovators that when we use business as a platform for change and also make real positive change across the technology landscape. So a question, so everyone get ready at your chat, sort of like questions at your fingertips. So what technology or even an app that you use in your personal life are you most excited about and that you think would really change the world? So I'm going to repeat the question again, but please do get typing. So what technology or even an app that you use in your personal life are you most excited about that you think will really change the world? So let me navigate over to the chat. I can see the messages. Oh, yeah. Chat GPT is, I would say, winning the argument here. Cell phones, into cell phones. That's a great answer. Oh, Shazam. Oh, loving it. As you all may be aware, Salesforce is very much behind the AI revolution that's happening, and ChatGPT, or at least the GPT revolution, is very much behind a lot of the innovative changes that we're currently making to our product stack. So I'm super excited to see ChatGPT or Metaverse. Completely agree. Coming up quite a lot there. Okay, thank you so much for your answers there. So we are going to meet the panel. So before I sort of get started, I'll give you a small introduction to myself. But I'll ask the panel to introduce themselves in a moment. So my name is Emma Richards. I am a solution engineering manager. I'm mainly focused on the marketing cloud. I've been at Salesforce for 11 years. Yes, 11 years. And it's been quite the ride over that time, but we'll come more to that later on. So if I could hand over to Vanessa to introduce herself.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Emma. First of all, thanks everyone for joining us. So I'm Vanessa Javon. I'm a senior client solution engineer here at Salesforce. I've been at Salesforce for 1.5 years now. So my role is to understand client integration challenges and showcase how they can leverage MuleSoft platform to meet those integration needs and also embrace digital transformation through APIs. So on a day-to-day basis, my role involves like building demos, presenting the MuleSoft point of view across all the enterprise integration patterns to a variety of audience. It could be from developers to architects, through line of business, or even C-level executives.
Amazing. Thank you, Vanessa. And over to you, Elliot.
Awesome. Thanks, Emma. First off, I'll actually just say my favorite answer from that question was Shazam for the best app. Whoever said that, we're friends. So my name's Elliot Crawford. I'm enterprise account executive for our aerospace and manufacturing customers within our product set called Service Cloud, which is centered around kind of customer experience. We may touch on that later. I've been at Salesforce for 2 years, and I've been in enterprise sales as a whole for the last 8 or so years. So it feels like longer, but yeah, 8 years. So that's me in a nutshell.
Love it. Thank you so much. So let's get started with the panel. So thank you so much for introducing yourselves. And obviously we'll all kind of come into different answers. So as we all know, the theme of today's call is all about elevating Black tech in the technology industry. So we're going to kick off with our first question. So thank you so much for those introductions, but I would love to delve like a little bit deeper into everyone's sort of career journey. So if you could you please tell me about your sort of career journey today at Salesforce, as well as before, if you fancy it, and what challenges you've experienced along the way. So to kick us off, I'd love to go back to Elliot.
Super. So I tried to kind of put a few bullet points down, so I stayed focused around this. I'm actually going to go back to into the entry into the market in terms of sales. And for me, it started with actually dropping out of university. And I'm not an advocate of that, by the way. I'm not saying that's what the path anyone should take, but that's just where my journey led me. So I did 1 year of university after studying Abrahamic religion and philosophy, and kind of was like, I don't know where I'm going to take this. So dropped out after just 1 year, and then proceeded to pretend I was still going to university for the first month or so, because I couldn't tell my mum that I dropped out of education. From there, I actually ended up spent about 6 months loading vans at Sainsbury's, which just wasn't where I'd seen my life going, right? But landed through kind of sending hundreds of applications, a role in a sales company selling advertising in a magazine. Talking kind of hardcore, 100 calls a day, finding people on the internet and trying to sell them advertising. So it was really intense, and that was my first introduction into sales. I had no intent of, going into sales as a career. It was kind of the first opportunity that came towards me. Fortunately, I after just 1 year, I ended up managing a team of 3 people in that same role, and realized I had an aptitude for sales. And through networking, connected with someone who's my mentor still today, and landed a role in EMC, which is now Dell EMC. So I was part of that acquisition and merger. And genuinely, I'll touch on this more later on, but through having a good mentor and having someone who just believed in me, actually, provided me the opportunity to break out of a place that I knew I didn't belong in, and that was my foray into enterprise software sales, which has led to this point. I then spent time kind of working under a few different organizations, and dreamt of working for Salesforce, actually, and now have the pleasure of doing that today.
Amazing. That's like, in terms of a squiggly line of a career, that's definitely a squiggly line of a career, but I just love it. Love the journey. And it's funny how many people you talk to have a similar story in terms of how they've found themselves in sales. So over to you, Vanessa. Same question to you in terms of what your career has been like to date, and any challenges that you faced.
Yeah, thank you. So about me, so overall I have like 8 years professional experience. So I kind of look my career into the lens of a project. For example, when you think about a project and the V cycle of the project, from gathering the requirements, designing it, implementing, testing, and so on. I started as a quality software engineer, so I've been working on mobile and web application in the travel industry, and then I moved to a developer role where I started implementing actually stuff. And ultimately, I kind of moved to a tech and people lead role within, the automotive industry. So I was kind of gathering requirements, like designing the solution, implementing, testing, and doing all together. So I kind of done everything in terms of project implementation piece of it. And then I was in the automotive industry when the COVID hit, actually, and the automotive industry was really impacted, and my project was impacted, and it kind of gave me the opportunity to reflect back on my career and what I wanted to do. And I realized at that time that I was working in an environment that was really stressful, because in the automotive industry, projects are really quick. Like, you need to really to ship the product really early, and it was really stressful for me. It impacted even my personal life a lot. And I was like, what do I really want, for me? What are my experiences? I knew that I still wanted to stay technical, but I also like fancying, being in a customer facing role where I could work across different projects, different industries. And this is when I thought about, okay, why not become like solution engineer, and yeah, this is a new role for me. I'm not used to it. I'm most of the time on the back end of the thing, back office kind of role, not really in the front face of people or projects. And then that's where I thought, okay, I want maybe to become a solution engineer. And then it's also, coincided with, a desire to change countries, because before I was living in France, and then I said, okay, let's move with my partner. We decided that we wanted to move to the UK. And so my first job as a solution engineer, I was more in a support role, where I was working in my previous company, accompanying premier customers on their projects. And then I kind of seen this opportunity with Salesforce, which was a kind of a pre-sale role. And I was like, hey, maybe sales is something for me, And yeah, I didn't have the experience of being in a sales kind of environment, but it was challenging. I had the technical skills. I just needed, to learn the sales skills, and I applied and I got the job. And ever since, I've been enjoying it. In terms of challenges, I've changed a lot of roles, when I did, all that V cycles, I went from one role to another, and each time I had to use some interpersonal skills to prove that I was able, to be good in the role, even if I needed to learn the specific technical skills for that specific role. So I was always, challenging myself, and I was always feeling a bit insecure, because I'm a woman, and now I'm also a Black person. And in the room, most of the time, it's a room filled of white men. So for me, I was like the only person there. I couldn't relate to anyone else. So this was pretty challenging for me. From engineering school throughout my whole career, I found myself most of the time being the single person of my type, like a Black woman. Yeah. So yeah, that's a bit about me. And what about you, Emma?
Thank you. So yeah, it's an interesting kind of time. Like I said, at Salesforce for 11 years, and a lot of my time in the Salesforce sort of journey has been in pre-sales, which is where I am now as a solution engineer or solution consultant, that you may well also know it as. And before that, I was in the post-sales part of the business for the early part of my time at Salesforce. And so it feels like I've kind of, in a nice way, bounced around, but I completely agree with you, Elliot. It's been sort of like, for me, at least it was, I agree with you, align with you. It's been like, I've had a little bit squiggly line, sort of like, as I've kind of got to where I need to get to. And in terms of, when I kind of think about my time at Salesforce, like, doing the sort of like, as I call it, like the day job in terms of things like solution engineer, and then going into management, and then I've got like my night jobs in terms of the sort of employee resource groups, and we'll talk more about that later. I think about sort of the biggest challenges. Again, I almost align with you again, Vanessa, and that my biggest challenge has been sort of learning how to like assert myself in spaces that might not be designed for my presence in the nicest way, and that's been like a big challenge, but definitely like something I've taken on and learned from. So I am happy to say that I'm able to hand back to Tunde, who will be moderating the rest of this panel. So in true Eurovision style, Tunde, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Amazing.
Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you. Yeah, calling from London. Yes.
Fantastic. Yeah, the tech works. Fantastic. Hello, everyone. How are we? Right. So I think we're done. So you're done. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Emma. I think we're over to Elliot.
I've also we're on. Well, I've answered the first question today. We're going on to the second question. I think we had scheduled.
Fantastic. All right. So for you, then I'll move on to the next one, Elliot. So, what have you learned about being Black in the tech industry?
Yeah. So this was a question that I really, it was challenging to be honest, because I think the first thing I learned when I was kind of thinking about this earlier is exactly that. Being Black in the tech industry has been challenging in itself. There's a few reasons for that. The first of which is it can be a place that you can feel quite lonely at times, because there's not many people of color, or I'm going to be more direct, and there's not many Black people actually in the tech world. So sometimes it can feel as though there's not many people who can empathize with our experience. And I just want to reiterate, not sympathize, because I don't want sympathy, but I want people to have understanding of what it's like to walk in my shoes, walk in a room, and there's nobody else that looks like me. That is a challenge. But to spin that into a positive front, what I've learned about myself is that I'm enduring, and I'm capable, because despite the challenges that we face, and I've been in some challenging environments where I've wanted to react actually in a way that I wouldn't be necessarily deemed acceptable, in that sometimes I've wanted to challenge things and question behaviors, but you have to do that in a capacity that still makes other people feel comfortable as well. But what I would say is to overcome those challenges, and I'll continue to reiterate this, having a network of people that can relate to your journey is really important, but also having a level of self-belief, self-confidence, but also reflect, because sometimes challenges, often when I've thought, is it because I'm Black? Sometimes it's actually no, because maybe I've gone into a meeting with a bad attitude, or not approach something in the right way. So all of those things, to summarize, I think is kind of is my experience.
Thanks, Elliot. So I heard resilience, I heard capability, but I also heard, I think, showing up with excellence from what you mentioned. Emma?
Thank you so much for that, Elliot, as well. That's super, like a really honest answer. Love it. Off the back of that, I think one of the things that I sort of, when I was reflecting about this question, is that you really do have to be your own hype person, and that can be tiring, because sometimes you just want someone else to be like, Emma, yes, like, hire her, she did the thing. But if you're not hyping yourself up, like, it's that sort of like that phrase, like, if you can't love yourself, like, ain't nobody gonna love you. Like, you need to be your own hype person, and that can be really difficult. I'm an introvert. I prefer sort of, not hyping myself up, if I'm honest. And so that's something that I spent a lot of time trying to like fight against, but knowing full well that it's good for my career. And again, I can kind of come to your point earlier, a lot of the reasons why you end up having to be your own hype person is because there aren't people that maybe either look like you, have similar experiences in places of, say, power, I mean, like people that can literally sponsor you or champion you in rooms that you're not part of. And so you have to be your own hype person, and that can be quite confronting, especially, well, for me personally, I definitely grew up with parents that were like, keep your head down, get on with the job, like get paid and just be happy. And so knowing, my mum, for example, she can't cope with the fact that I wear my hair out as an afro most days, if I'm honest, because for her, it's like, that's too loud. People will notice you. But you really do have to be your own hype person. But thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Thanks, Elliot. Thank you both for those questions, for the answers. So be your own hype person, understand the power of sponsorship, and I think not be afraid to blow your own trumpet. Is what I heard. All right, so moving on to, I think, the next question. So talking about community support. So Vanessa, I'll come to you next. So how can the community support and champion Black talent?
Thanks for this. So I think here, I mean, key is really like information and awareness. So I think it starts really early. It starts first with our kids, like opening their minds, to the aim of possible. For example, in the tech space, for example, I think about the fact that, as a professional in the tech and as a parent or an auntie, I could talk about my role, about what I do in the tech to my nephews, my nieces, and my kids also, and like take them to science fair, like get them excited about science. Because, for example, when I was in engineering school, we kind of organized like something around like Move the Science, where we brought a junior high school student, and then we showed them like what cool things they could do with science, and then during all the day they were kind of chaperoned with an engineer, and they could discuss with them, bringing our kids to those kind of events. And also within the community, creating an association where like professional Black people could come and also provide career guidance, and mentorship opportunities, like helping, our young generation, or even people that are maybe shifting careers, like to understand what is possible out there, and how they can, reach those kind of role, those kind of jobs, So yeah, that's what I think. And what about you, Tunde? I know that you work a lot around this topic.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So for sure, community support and championing Black talent. So the communities are kind of very big for me. I think kind of talent attraction, those types of things, very heavy in and around people getting started. And they're probably for similar reasons that I've heard from some of you. So Elliot mentioned earlier, just being able to where you are and seeing what you've done, and then looking around and not seeing anybody that looks like you. So a lot of things that I do is promote events. I think we were very quiet in, oh, I know what I'm doing, I'm my own corner, I'm succeeding. But sometimes just being not loud and extravagant, but providing opportunities for others. So sharing a link, something up on LinkedIn, putting something up on your WhatsApp status, sharing it in your kind of local community groups, things that you don't think would trigger something else, but you show that the more you do that, the more amplification you're given to opportunities and access to people. And I think that's very important in that element of like creating that element of championing. And then when I see anybody who's got ideas or who's got like the smallest inkling of interest in what we do, I make noise about it. I also do that. Yeah, that's also very important. All right, thank you. So moving on. So we've talked about like the community. We're moving on to corporates, and kind of I'll start with you, Emma, on this one. How can corporates support and champion Black talent?
It's a great question, and obviously everyone on the call, I imagine, is just like, how? And I'm interested if anyone's got any other things, obviously other than what we say, but big one for me is very much leaning into the employee resource or like the business resource groups. It's so easy, and I've definitely been spoiled at Salesforce in terms of how much we lean into those groups. Like it's anyone has a look at our websites, especially salesforce.com/equality, you'll see how much we do definitely like lean into that, and it's really important, and it runs through like the fabric of who we are. But I know that that's not the same at other companies, and so everything sort of runs, I guess, in terms of data and money, unfortunately, in terms of our sort of corporate world. But it is a case really of putting your money where your mouth is and supporting those groups. Also just championing the talent that you have in front of you. And Elliot made it's going to stick with me for forever, I think, but you want empathy, not sympathy. It's sort of like you want to be put in places where you're given true opportunities. It's not like, an opportunity that may not lead to somewhere, but like a true growth opportunity so that you can prove yourself in those spaces, and having the opportunity to do so. But I'll stop there because we've going to move on to the rest of the panel. But yeah, it really is all about properly leaning in. So yeah.
Thanks, Emma. And I think you mentioned Elliot already, so I'll come to you, Elliot.
You're on mute.
I'm forever doing that. I'm so sorry. Yeah, thank you, Emma. I actually just wanted to highlight because we'd spoken, I think, was it yesterday or the day before, and you mentioned something that really stuck with me in terms of hiring Black talent at all levels. Actually, I think is something that is really crucial. And we ironically work in a space where numbers, statistics, data is really important. So I think organizations like Salesforce and others need to incorporate that idea and strategy into their thinking for recruitment. So how do we prioritize positively actually hire Black talent to provide opportunities, but then actually how do we track their progress? Because if we're hiring 10 Black people, but 8 of them leave after 6 months because they feel they've been treated unfairly, that's not progress. So it's actually, can we look at measuring that journey for a Black employee, understanding the Black experience to ensure that we're actually retaining talent and providing people fair opportunity to succeed. The other point, I mentioned it earlier, I was at another event actually surrounding kind of Black talent promotion, and someone said the phrase, you have to see it to be it. And that's to Emma's point of hiring at all levels, having actually top level leadership. I found this on the web. Sorry, my watch had an opinion of where I can see, I can be visible of, you know, I can see Elliot has achieved X. I can see Emma's in that position, and that gives me something to aspire to. It is what I think organizations can do to be responsible, to actually not just having a marketing mechanism, but actually proactively impacting the cause.
Thank you, Elliot. That's great. So if you don't, you have to see it to be it. That's quite powerful. Hiring at all levels, that's quite powerful as well. I would throw something in here kind of from a point of view perspective, just before I kind of move on to the next question. That I myself, I do a lot of kind of joining Salesforce as part of an acquisition. I came here as a certified technical architect. So that's something that I hadn't seen any other Black person be at the time when I did it in 2018. So that was a big deal for me, being able to pave the way, being able to do something no one else had. And I had a lot of people reach out and say things like, I never knew there was somebody at this level who was Black, who had done what this is. Can you show us the way or teach us? And I'm always open to that, for sure. Joining Salesforce as well, I think, Emma, you mentioned it around equality. I kind of made a beeline for Boldforce because I had been eyeing Boldforce from before I got to Salesforce, actually, because I saw the Africa logo across it and I thought, this is something that I need to be about. Like, it's in Salesforce, it's Africa, I need to know what's going on there. So just having that support, then leading Boldforce this year in the UK with the support of the team, that's definitely something that helps kind of in championing that element of kind of Black talent, being able to have voices and amplify those voices in rooms where you usually wouldn't have it, and be able to have uncomfortable conversations, have difficult conversations, but raise the standard and ensure that people have been represented properly. I think that's super critical. Okay, moving on to kind of an ultimate question. This one's coming to you, Elliot. So what is one barrier commonly experienced by Black talent that is not discussed enough, in your opinion?
Yeah. So to name one, I've summed it up as kind of a lack of meritocracy within the space. And I appreciate the corporate world has this complexity, but it's appreciating that there's a number of different factors, and sometimes watching other people ahead of you maybe getting the promotion you think you may deserve, or the role you think you're destined for, you don't quite get, and you can't put your finger on why. And as I said earlier, that doesn't necessarily mean we jump to the cause of it's because I'm Black, but sometimes it does. When I've had some reflection, there's been some moments where I've thought, have I lost that deal because they didn't feel comfortable with me in the room? Or and it's unfortunate that the world we live in today, that these are things that I even have to kind of process it in my own mind. But I'd say that that along with, again, kind of there's nobody that can pull me up the chain and can guide me as much and live in my shoes, as I've said, for my experience. So I know you said one, so forgive me, but they're the two things that I can add to the discussion.
Brilliant. Thank you. I forgive you. I forgive you. Okay. Vanessa?
Yeah, for me, when I was thinking about this question, I was thinking about intersectionality, the acknowledgement that everyone has their own experience and discrimination and oppression, and it's personal, so the fact that, yes, Black itself is already a diversity, but Black is not monolithic, there's the diversity within the diverse group itself. So because we have like Black from the Caribbean, Black from Africa, Black from America, even from Africa, there are different countries, so everyone has its own struggle and challenges. And growing up as a Black, I don't have the same challenge as you, Tunde, or you, Emma, or you, Elliot. And I think we need really to take a further step in terms of inclusivity and to recognize, and celebrate those nuances and see a Black person as an individual with its unique challenges and address those challenges at an individual level instead of, just putting Black as a monolithic. Yeah. So yeah, that's my view on it.
Pretty cool. Thank you. Thanks, Vanessa. All right. So moving on to the kind of last question before the live Q&A. So I think we've got a few questions that are kind of sitting in the chat already. But I'll come to you, Emma, for the last question. So what advice do you have? And this is like this is kind of $1 million question type things. What advice do you have for other Black professionals looking to break into tech?
It's a properly deep question. And the more I thought about it, the more I think networking, and I talked about it a bit earlier, but oh my gosh, network. It doesn't have to always be or feel very forced. So that there are situations like this, for example, or like in-person sessions, or people that you currently work with, for example. But just what I've found is that the tech world is so small. And even if you might not end up necessarily working with the same people again, they will very much, that sort of 6 degrees of separation with people that you do and that over time sort of thing. It's like, oh, I know that person, and people talk. We're doing it right now, right? And so networking is super, super important. Find a way that works for you. It could be, for example, picking out a couple of different mentors, for example, and having them help you. It could be going to events like this. It could be going to events that happen in person, but find a way that works for you so it's genuine. But oh my goodness, network is my big piece of advice.
Brilliant. Network. I hear that. Vanessa.
I second that. Network. But on top of that, I think you still need to be always curious, read, document yourself, always have a view of what's happening in the tech, and seeing the response from people around ChatGPT. Everyone here is on the latest trend now, so that's really good to know. And yeah, but how do you stay on top of those trends? You listen to podcasts, you kind of register to some technical magazine, you document yourself really. And then the second point I'll be saying is around the fact that I know that Emma touched about it, that it can be tiresome sometimes, but the system is not going to change overnight. And until the system change, please don't hesitate to be your own advocate. Don't assume because you're doing the work, someone will recognize you. Do it be your own champion, basically, Yeah.
Absolutely. Be your own champion. Thank you. Elliot.
So yeah, and networking was the one I'd said, but I feel like it's been said a lot. So, but yeah, one of my mentors says to me, he said to me a few years ago, your network is your net worth. And that really stuck with me. So I always try and maintain relationships. Don't burn bridges is something I'd definitely say. The second would be don't say no to opportunities. Get comfortable being uncomfortable because you're gonna have to do that in order to be successful. But then equally be accountable. And I've said it a few times, but if you know that there's potentially a disadvantage that you're going to face going into a room, make sure you are the very best. And I have to give my mum a little shout out. She would always say to me, if I do even if I was doing my chores in the house, hoovering, cleaning, anything, should say do it the very best you can do, because it's a representation of when you're going into the world of work. That's for what the quality of work you're going to bring to what you're doing there as well. So thank you, Mum. She's not here, but that's me.
For grinding excellence into you. I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. I can relate to that. Yeah, like you have to carry the flag properly of the family name. You can't let the team down. It's not acceptable. All right, thank you very much, kind of to all of you. So we're going to move into like a live Q&A now for the next few minutes. And now we want to hear from you, the audience. So we have 10 minutes for the Q&A. If you have any burning questions, I'm going to use the question and answer function in the Zoom panel. And I'll start with a few. So we kind of got a few pre-submitted questions that kind of we will kind of throw out. So I'll let the panel kind of jump on the questions as we go along. So the first one, someone's asking, your advice for someone looking to move into tech from a non-tech or non-traditional background?
That is a great question. Happy to start there. That's one of the, so I didn't touch on it, but my background was kind of in, before I came to Salesforce, was very much squiggly. So I started a medical degree, long story, but I ended up starting this job effectively in my sort of second year of university. Technology has always been my sort of close second love next to medical science. But as you can imagine, being a doctor is very different to what I do today, which is very much looking at, technology and teams and things like that. That said, though, one of the big things I used to think about was what were my transferable skills, or what were things that I liked about what I wanted, the career I wanted to go into, that I'm going to enjoy in this career. And that's one bit of advice I would definitely give to the person who asked that question. Is think about those transferable skills. You may not necessarily have I have, not done X amount of years in that role. And for example, if you're applying, however, are you a problem solver, for example? And I'm sure you can probably find examples of how you've done that in your, various different careers. How are you minded? Are you self-motivated? That sort of stuff. Just kind of like break it down. And of course, I'm going to say it again because I'm enjoying it, but like network. But find authentic ways of doing it. I can't impress on you enough. Like, ways in which you can get in front of people and show things that you can do in a genuine way.
Thank you.
Anyone else on the panel?
Sorry, Emma, was that to me?
Just anyone else, if anyone else has
Oh.
Yeah.
I was just going to add to it. Just be brave, and part of it, just don't overcomplicate it. If you want to do it, apply. Like the worst someone's going to say to you is no. And they're not going to then look at your name on a permanent board and say you're never getting again. So just apply. And also apply yourself. You get prepared, but just do it.
Okay.
Just do it.
Just do it. Okay, thank you. How do you stand out from the crowd in interviews for tech roles?
I can take this one. I think, the main thing is like in every project you worked on, whether it's at school or early in your career, you really need to have a clear, bullet points about the impact that you bring in the project. What has your action provided to the overall project or the overall company? This piece of impact is really what is really important for your recruiter, for your new manager that wants to hire you. They want to know, like, what is your capability to create, to innovate? What are your, if you're brought into a situation that you didn't know, what is your process of thinking, how will you be able to solve the challenge that you've been brought to? So I think that is really what you need actually to show during an interview, that you're capable of, these interpersonal skills that Emma was just talking about, problem solving, critical thinking, thinking out of the box, so have really in everything that you're doing, have, those metrics, impact. What was my impact,
Yeah, I've heard something where you mentioned excellence, you mentioned show your impact. I heard something around transferable skills. I think that you mentioned as well, Emma. So every experience has something that you can use to relate to something else. So there's nothing that is in a vacuum. So the fact that, for example, Elliot's mom said, when you're hoovering, make sure you do it excellently, because when you then get to a point where you're selling, you'd also kind of have that attitude already of excellence, and that would come through in anything you're doing. I think I like that. Thank you. Okay. Taking you back a little, something you wish you knew when you started your career.
Yeah, aim big. I could take this one also. I mean, I think when I started, I think I kind of isolated myself in a specific role, saying that I studied this, you know, so I need to go into that specific role. I wasn't thinking really outside of the box. So with a few years now, I could say like, yeah, I could have aimed bigger, you know, like trying to reach things that I didn't know were possible for me. Yeah, so that's what I wish to know, that I'm able to do anything with smart planning and hard work, you know, I could do anything.
Okay. Anybody else? Yeah, go for it.
Happy to add to that. I completely agree with you, Vanessa. I think I'm a natural overthinker, and so if I could go back in time and tell myself, like, stop thinking too hard about it, kind of to Elliot's point, like, what is the worst that could happen? Apply, or put yourself out there in that situation. Yeah, just do it.
Be bold. Just
yeah,
do it.
That's it. Yeah, be bold.
Be bold. I like it. Yeah, I think I agree with that. Kind of don't live in your own head a lot. I mean, there's definitely, just kind of say it, do it, be it. Yeah, I like it. Okay. Yeah. So what transferable skills have served you in your role, and were any particularly surprising?
Oh,
I
great.
can try. I could take a stab at that. For me, I think it's actually just kind of sorry, Emma, you said this earlier again. So your interpersonal skills, the ability to manage relationships is, and it relates to that Dale Carnegie book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Relationships are so crucial. So just being, I know it sounds a bit corny, but just being a good person, I think goes a long way, and being conscious of people's making space for others, I think is a really crucial part of it. But from an interpersonal, yeah, I think just managing relationships, speaking to people, but it's something that's so simple, we do every day. But for my job today, it's the most crucial part of what I do is managing relationships.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I think hearing you speak kind of it takes me back a little, kind of when you mentioned, like, I've only had like one proper interview through my career. Every other opportunity has been someone who I'd worked with prior recommending me for something else. So it's almost like you walk into a room and someone's gone, oh, you've got the right person for this, Sunday's perfect. And then you get there and the conversation is about, what do you know? It's more about like, what do you like? Would you fit in the team? Would you gel well with the team? And those are the questions, as opposed to, can you do this excellently? Because X has said you can do it excellently. And that's happened over and over again, kind of all through my time. And it's kind of quite uncanny, but I can say it now, it's exactly what's happened. So being able to be that element of transferable skills, be a good person, but when you're on a team, be excellent. Those are kind of super important things. All right, so we have a few things on the chat as well. I'll try to read a few of them just as we go along. What emerging tech skill should new developers be ready to tackle? And should we simply forget old tech code? I'm not sure who's asked that. I guess I'm techie on the call. I know Vanessa's techie as well, so I can kind of have a go at that. So there is no new skill that is not built on an old one. I guess is a question to ask. So there's no tech skill you're learning that is throwaway. I know there's some that change or transition or transform, become more or less popular, but whatever you're learning is relevant, and you could always learn more. Tech is so broad and so big and so innovative and so dynamic that every morning you wake up, something's changing, something's changed. There's a new version of your app on your phone. There's a new version of your your iPad, of your laptop, of your, yeah. So being able to kind of keep in sync, I think, with the tech is good, as opposed to throw one out and kind of bring one in. I think I'll move on to the next one. We had a question from Mary, which says, how did you gain a sponsor, a mentor in your corner? This is a good one. How did you gain a mentor or sponsor in your corner?
I happy to have a stab at this one. The most powerful mentor I currently have, who's ended up being a bit of a coach and sponsor at the same time, but very much more of a mentor. In fact, I was chatting with him today. We just started talking, and I always say like mentorship or coaching sponsor slightly different, sponsor slightly different, but mentorship, I think it's got like such a big like weight behind it. And people think like, how do I find a mentor? Like, where do I go? Like, do I get in touch with someone? And sometimes it's a case of, again, being part of some of those networking opportunities means that you can talk to people, and you talk to people on like a different level. So you might just, I don't know, I can't remember what we started talking about way back when, but it wasn't necessarily about work, just about, you know, where we lived or something like that. But we built a relationship, and then we were able to kind of then focus it back towards work. So in terms of finding those people, don't overthink it, genuinely. And also there's also value in having people that, like, I've got loads of like peer mentors as well. So it doesn't always have to be someone that is XXX levels or perceived XXX levels above you. But that's my 2 pennies worth.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Have a go at it. Me, for example, so I've been on maternity leave the last month, and then I came back, and there've been a lot of changes in terms of the messaging of the product I was selling, for example. So I was like, maybe I need, to skill up a bit, because maybe I need to refresh myself on the messaging, and I've been doing that. And then I've been speaking with one of my colleagues, and I was saying, I might need maybe to shadow some opportunities to see exactly what is a new way of doing things. And just by discussing, with this colleague, he just said, okay, oh, why not? I mean, I can buddy you, I can have a regular session with you where we go through your opportunities, and then I could kind of advise you, and you could also join some of my calls. It was just around a conversation, where I was just telling him what the struggle I was having, and then he just kindly, offered, to mentor me. Yeah,
that's good. So it's about relationships again.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have one here. Question for the panel. Says, I'm a graduate engineer working in the defense sector. There are a few Black people who work at my site, about 5 or 6 of us, of about 400 employees. Thought we'd form a tribe or a group, but whenever I reach out to kind of start a conversation, they don't seem ready to mix. Get the impression they don't want to form a Black group, in quotes. Have any of you experienced this? Like starting I'm looking at you, maybe Emma, based on kind of the conversations we've had around how do you kind of begin something. I know kind of a lot of Bold Force in EMEA was brainchild, and then blood, sweat, and tears to what it is today, for example, to a few hundred people. Maybe you can share some thoughts on this.
Yeah, happy to. I'm just having a think. It's a really great question, and it's sort of like in twofold. Obviously, naturally, you don't want to force people into something they don't want to do. Step one. And if you are looking, and if you are get to that point and you are still looking for that tribe, naturally there are other places in which you may be able to get what you're looking for in other places, for example, the BIP network, naturally. But in terms of trying to start that group, I think where I definitely faced quite a lot of, wouldn't say resistance, but skepticism, like natural healthy skepticism was what is the why? Like, talk to me about like, why do we need it? What's it going to be doing? Are we exposing ourselves? Because there's naturally there's a worry in that, in terms of how we sometimes are perceived. And so very much had to focus and center everything on the why. There's a reason why this group is needed. This group will then help X. And we sort of came up with a bit of a sort of mission statement. We call them VT Moms in Salesforce, but you can kind of think of it as a bit of a mission statement in terms of what is it we'd like to do, how are we going to do it, and why. But it doesn't have to be that formal, but
Mm.
maybe it's a case that you just need to explain to people like that it would actually be a good idea, like why you think it would be a good idea. But if you come across again repeated resistance, you can't force it. And I would encourage, you know, finding other places to build that tribe.
Connect. Thank you, Emma. So one question from Ade. What are some effective strategies or resources specifically tailored to Black individuals breaking into Salesforce industry?
So I just thinking of the question today. Can you repeat it? Sorry, just because I'm making.
So it's looking for resources that are specifically tailored to Black talent, kind of trying to break into the Salesforce industry.
So I don't want to speak on Salesforce's behalf, but I'm going to. In that I don't think there is resources for Black talent in particular for any one role. I think everything is accessible to everyone. I think as it should be. And we can point you in the direction of the things like Trailhead, for enablement if you want to get familiar with the platform. Emma, you and Vanessa most probably will be better than me at looking at technical resources. But I'd say it's all available kind of on the public domain generally.
Yeah, and on top of Trailhead, you have also, you know, community meetup. Like, for example, within MuleSoft, we have like MuleSoft community meetup. It means that, for example, in London or Manchester, people like partners or customers of MuleSoft or Salesforce will regroup together and exchange ideas and talk about the latest around the products. So we have, but it's, I mean, as Elliot said, it's not specifically tailored to Black, but to everyone, you know, it's available for everyone.
Yeah, and I know at least that on Trailhead, you have Trailblazer community groups, and the groups are more, I mean, the affinities are more around like where people live or around a particular product. So there's one for admins in London, there's one for admins that live in Birmingham, and admins that live in Manchester, and then they get together, you join those groups, and then you're able to collaborate. I mean, with some work for Salesforce, some don't, but they're all kind of in the ecosystem, and everyone's kind of open and welcoming, for sure, kind of trying to give guidance as you go. I mean, if anything, the Trailblazers kind of ecosystem at Salesforce is very unique in how people give their time back for others, how they kind of go out of their way to answer questions, how they go out of their way I think Salesforce does a great job, I think, of recognizing that anyway, just in the way to put together. But for sure, that's one to do. Okay, right. So there may be one more question before I kind of start looking at the. So in your experience and in observing those in your industry, are coding and non-coding roles equally accessible, or have you noticed a general preference for one over the other?
It's a really interesting question. And I'm a solution engineer manager, or solution consultants, depends on how you phrase it. And so I've got people in my team who are incredibly technically minded, who would probably prefer coding, quite frankly, over speaking to actual human beings in the nicest way. And I've got people who on the other side are much more like business minded, and will, again, the idea of coding is so like a bit of anathema to them. They're just a bit like, no. And hopefully that kind of gives you a bit of an answer to your question. I think and I think many other people, and it's not just me, there's a lot of value in having people on different sides of that sort of coding, non-coding coin, at least in like a role that might be perceived as being quite technical like mine. So I haven't observed on my side, at least for roles that are available to it. Naturally, if you're applying for a coder role, that's kind of where you're going to be at, right? But I haven't seen there to be a particular stance either side.
The other thing. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. And I should say thank you to the panel. Thank you all for joining us today. We really hope kind of you're feeling inspired to take a courageous step, kind of to jump into tech. We feel you're kind of ready to move things forward in new ways. And a special thank you to BYP for hosting us all, and for all of you for tuning in today. Keep an eye on your inbox for more details about Salesforce, talent community, a lot more content about open roles. But for now, I'll say thank you, and I'll hand it over back to Aman to close us out.